It's hard to put into words what it feels like when the life you thought you knew just shatters. My name is Hannah. I'm 35 years old, and for most of my life, I thought I had it all figured out. I had my husband Greg, who was the same age as me, and our bright, energetic 10-year-old son Ryan. Life was moving along, not perfect, but steady enough. Ryan was growing up so fast, always curious, asking questions, reading way beyond his years. He had this amazing ability to think for himself, even at such a young age. Greg, well, he was a bit of a wild card. We had our ups and downs, sure, but I believed in him. I always thought that one day things would click for him, that he'd find his place, hold down a steady job, and be the partner I needed. But that wasn't happening. Greg never could keep a job for long, and even though I worked full-time to support us, it always felt like we were just getting by. Then, not too long ago, Greg seemed to hit a streak. For about 3 years he'd been holding down a stable job, and for the first time in a long while he talked about making memories, about creating a life for the three of us. So we made some big decisions. We bought a camper van. It was supposed to be an investment in our family, something we could take trips in, build experiences, but there was a catch. Greg couldn't get approved for the loan, so the van ended up in my name. And then, that day, I remember it like it was yesterday. I had just gotten off work and there it was, an email from Greg. It was short, like he didn't even care to sugarcoat it. He told me he was leaving. He was in love with someone else. He'd fallen for her and now he was going to start a new life with her. The words didn't make sense at first. What about us? What about the family? I remember asking. But there was no response, no explanation, just cold, final words. I'm done. And that was it. My heart dropped as I read the email again. And again. No matter how many times I read it, it didn't make sense. But there it was. My husband, Greg, had just walked out of our lives. Left me with a $35,000 0 cents loan, a debt I could never have imagined handling alone. I called him immediately, my voice shaking as I tried to reach him. He answered, but it wasn't the Greg I knew. It was like I was talking to a stranger. He explained that he'd made up his mind. He was already with her, the other woman. And that was it. He didn't care about the loan, didn't care about the house or our son. Nothing. He hung up before I could even respond, leaving me with nothing but silence. I tried calling him over and over, but it was like he vanished, gone, just gone, and all I could do was sit there stunned, staring at my phone, not believing what had just happened. Has anything like this happened to you? Let me know in the comments. The days after Greg left felt like a blur. Every time I tried to push myself forward, it was like my body just couldn't keep up. The stress from the betrayal, the worry about the debt, the constant pressure of not knowing how I was going to make it all started to take a toll. I thought I could handle it, that I could push through for Ryan, but the truth is, I wasn't okay. Ryan, though, seemed to know something was wrong before I even realized it myself. I'd be in the kitchen barely able to eat, staring blankly at the wall, and he'd come up to me, his little face full of concern. "Mom, are you okay? You haven't been eating much lately," he'd say in that way of his, like he wasn't just asking because he had to, but because he really wanted to know. I'd tried to brush it off. "Maybe I'm just tired," I'd say, but I could see the worry in his eyes. He wasn't fooled, not for a second. Ryan was far too sharp for his age. It was hard for me to admit, but I was slipping. Mentally, physically, emotionally, and he could feel it. I kept pushing myself, thinking maybe it was just stress, that I'd snap out of it. But one afternoon at work, it all came crashing down. I was sitting in a meeting, trying to keep everything together, when suddenly, everything started spinning. I couldn't breathe. I felt dizzy, lightheaded, like the world was closing in on me, and before I knew it, I collapsed, right there in front of everyone. The next thing I remember is waking up in a hospital bed, my body hooked up to machines. The sterile smell of the room, the bright lights above me, it all felt like a bad dream. But it wasn't. The doctor walked in, and I could see from his face that something wasn't right. "You've been under a lot of stress, Hannah," he said softly. "But the truth is, this is more than just emotional exhaustion. You have a serious health condition that's been aggravated by all the stress you've been under. We need to run more tests, but you'll need surgery soon. I'm afraid you can't keep pushing yourself like this." I felt the weight of his words settle in. It wasn't just the betrayal anymore. It wasn't just the debt. It was everything. My body had finally reached its breaking point, and even as the doctor explained everything, all I could think about was Ryan. When they told me I had to undergo surgery, It was hard to even wrap my mind around it. How could I leave him alone, with no one else to depend on? The guilt, the worry, it all just hit me at once. How had I let it get this far? Ryan had always been my rock, and here I was, feeling so broken. But I knew I couldn't let him down. I had to get better, for him. Even if the road ahead felt so uncertain, I couldn't give up now. He needed me, and somehow, I was going to find a way to pull through. When I finally came home from the hospital, my body was still weak, but my mind was racing. I had no choice but to face reality. The bills piled up on the counter, the letters from the bank, the loan demands, everything felt overwhelming. But the hardest blow came when I checked our joint account. I stared at the screen in disbelief. The $20,000 0 cents that had once been there, the money I had carefully saved over the years, was now gone. Every penny was wiped out. All that remained was $33.90. I couldn't breathe. I didn't understand. Where had it all gone? Of course, I knew the answer. Greg had taken it all. The money, the stability, everything that we had worked for. He wasn't just gone from our lives. He had taken everything and left me to pick up the pieces. I felt like I was sinking deeper, the weight of the debt pressing down on me harder than ever, the camper van, the loan, the money. It was all a mess. I didn't know how I was going to make ends meet. I couldn't work like this. How was I going to keep going? But then, Ryan, my amazing son, stepped in. I was sitting at the kitchen table trying to figure out what to do when I heard him. He had that serious look on his face, the one he always gets when he's thinking. "Mom," he said, "I'll help. I'll start delivering newspapers." I was stunned. "But Ryan, you're just a kid. You don't have to worry about this. I'll figure something out." He shook his head. "I want to help. I'll do whatever I can. Maybe I can find something else too, like looking for jobs online. I know you're stressed, and I hate seeing you like this." I wanted to cry, but I couldn't, not in front of him. Instead, I just hugged him, holding him close, and told him I was proud of him. I knew he was only 10, but somehow, he seemed more mature than I did in that moment. It was humbling, it was heartbreaking. But Ryan wasn't done. A few days later, he came to me with a plan. "Mom, I've been thinking," he said. "What if we could track Dad down? We could use the GPS app on my phone. Remember when we installed it for hiking? Maybe we can find where he is and get the van back, or at least figure out where all the money went." I was shocked. This little boy, who should have been worried about school and playing with friends, was coming up with a plan to track down the man who had torn our family apart. His mind was sharp, and it was almost like he could see the world in ways I hadn't considered. "That's actually a great idea, Ryan," I said. "We could find him. We could get some answers." And just like that, we had a plan. It wasn't the answer I'd hoped for, but it was something. And maybe, just maybe, it was the first step in getting some justice for what Greg had done. Ryan's plan started to come together faster than I expected. Over the next few days, he kept an eye on the GPS app, tracking the movements of Greg's phone. Every time it pinged, Ryan would show me the map on his phone, pointing out where Greg had been. We weren't sure what we were going to find, but we knew one thing. We had to try. I was amazed at how seriously Ryan was taking it. He knew this wasn't just about finding Greg. It was about understanding why he left, why he betrayed us both. He was determined to get the answers I couldn't seem to find on my own. So one evening, after tracking his movements for a while, Ryan looked up at me and said, "Mom, I think he's at the forest park. We should go there." My heart raced. The forest park wasn't far from our house, and I never imagined that the next time I would be there, it would be under these circumstances. But there was no turning back. I grabbed my coat, and we headed out. When we arrived, I didn't know what to expect, but as we walked into the park, I could see something that made my stomach drop. There, parked near the edge of the trees, was Greg's car. My heart started to pound in my chest, and Ryan, ever the calm one, just took a deep breath. As we approached the car, I noticed a police car parked nearby. My stomach turned. What was Greg doing here? Why were the police involved? I had no idea, but the tension in the air was thick. When we got closer, I could see Greg standing by the car, looking nervous, his hands on his hips. The officer was asking him questions, but Greg kept shifting uncomfortably, his eyes darting around. His mistress, Mandy, was sitting in the front seat of the car, arms crossed, looking at us with a smug smile. I didn't have time to process everything before the officer turned to me. "Ma'am, is this your husband?" she asked, looking me over carefully. I nodded. "Yes, that's him," I said, trying to steady my voice. "Greg, What are you doing here?" Greg didn't say anything at first. He just looked down at the ground, avoiding my gaze. I could tell he wasn't expecting me to show up, let alone with Ryan. Mandy, from the passenger seat, decided to chime in. "Oh, please, you think you're going to get answers from him? He's the one who abandoned you, remember?" Her voice dripped with condescension. Ryan's voice cut through the tension like a knife. "Why did you leave us, Dad? Why did you choose her over Mom?" Everyone went quiet. Greg shifted his weight, visibly uncomfortable. Mandy looked away, trying to act like she wasn't paying attention, but I could see her unease. Ryan's question hung in the air, sharp and pointed. He wasn't playing around. Greg finally looked at Ryan, his face flushed with embarrassment, but instead of an answer he muttered, "I don't know, things just changed." His voice was weak, nothing like the man I thought I knew. Ryan wasn't done. "No, Dad, you left us. You left me and Mom, without any explanation. You just ran away. Why?" Greg shifted again, looking for an escape, but there was none. The reality of what he had done was too obvious to deny. Mandy piped up again, this time with a more arrogant tone. "It's simple. He chose me because I'm better for him. Don't you see it? He couldn't stand living with your mom anymore. I'm the one who makes him happy." Ryan's eyes narrowed, and for a moment he looked at Mandy as though he could see right through her. "You think that makes it okay? That you're better than Mom?" he said, his voice firm. "You're just as bad as him." Mandy didn't say anything after that. Her smug smile vanished, replaced by a look of frustration, but she didn't have the words to defend herself. As I stood there watching my son stand up to both Greg and Mandy, something inside me shifted. It was like Ryan had taken control of the situation. I felt this surge of pride for him, for his strength, for the way he was handling this mess that we had been thrown into. And then it hit me. Greg, the man I thought I knew, the man I had loved, was broken. And it was his son, not him, who was showing what true strength meant. Greg stood there, frozen, as the weight of the situation sank in. He was caught. There was no denying it now, no excuses. No more hiding behind the lies. The police were standing nearby, just waiting for him to crack, and even Mandy, sitting in the car, was no longer looking so smug. She tried to speak up, but this time her voice was faltering. "You don't understand," she said, trying to defend Greg, but the words seemed hollow. Ryan's sharp question had cut through her, leaving her scrambling for something to say. Greg didn't respond to Ryan. He just stood there, his face flushed with embarrassment, his hands fidgeting nervously. The man who had once seemed so confident, so sure of himself, now appeared completely lost. For a moment, he just stared at Ryan, unable to meet his eyes, clearly shaken by the boldness of his son. Ryan wasn't done, though. His voice was steady, his words clear and direct. "Dad, why? Why did you leave us?" His gaze was unwavering, and for the first time, I saw Greg's discomfort. He was rattled. Greg opened his mouth, but no words came out. The realization was starting to hit him. His own son was calling him out for the betrayal, and there was nothing he could say to justify it. Then, Ryan did something that completely turned the tide in our favor. He looked directly at Greg, and with quiet confidence he said, "I know where you've been, Dad. I know where you've been going. I've been tracking you." Greg's eyes widened. He looked at me, and for the first time there was a flicker of recognition, like he finally understood the full extent of Ryan's determination. "What are you talking about?" He stammered. Ryan pulled out his phone and showed him the GPS app. "I put it on my phone. We've been watching you. I've been tracking every place you've gone. You thought you could just disappear and we wouldn't know? We knew everything." The look on Greg's face was one of complete shock. For all his planning, for all his running away, he hadn't counted on Ryan. He hadn't realized how sharp, how resourceful his own son was. And in that moment it felt like the balance of power shifted entirely. I felt a surge of strength I hadn't known I had. I was no longer the victim. I wasn't the one left behind, the one stuck with the debt, the one cleaning up the mess Greg had made. No, now I was in control. "Greg," I said, my voice calm but firm, "I want the $20,000 0 cents you stole from our account. It's our money and you have no right to it. You're going to return it, right now." The words felt empowering. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't afraid. I wasn't worried about how to make it work or where to turn next. I was demanding what was rightfully mine, and I wasn't backing down. Greg opened his mouth, but the words didn't come. He looked at me and then he glanced at the police officer who was watching intently, waiting for him to respond. The reality was settling in and he knew he was trapped. There was no escape. That's when I looked at Ryan, my son who had helped me find my strength. His face was set in that same determined expression, and for a moment I saw how much he had grown. He wasn't just my child anymore, he was my partner, my ally in this fight. Ryan had faced down his father, stood tall against the man who had walked out on us, and now he was giving me the courage to take the next step. "I'm not going to let him get away with this, Mom," Ryan said softly, but his words held so much weight. He wasn't afraid, and because of that neither was I. I turned back to Greg. "You're going to pay for what you did. It's over." The power had shifted, and Greg knew it. As we stood there, the tension still hanging in the air, I could feel the world around us closing in. Everything was about to come to a head and I wasn't sure what would happen next. But then, just as Greg and Mandy were trying to figure out how to dig their way out of this, a car pulled up. It was Mandy's parents. Ryan had done something I hadn't expected. He had contacted them. And now, as I looked over, I saw them step out of the car, their faces red with anger. They were furious, clearly expecting an explanation, but no one could have prepared them for what they were about to walk into. Mandy froze when she saw them, her face paling. She wasn't expecting this. She wasn't expecting her parents to show up, and she wasn't expecting them to know the full story. I could feel a shift in the air, like everything was finally clicking into place. Mandy had been living in a bubble, thinking she was above it all, but now her deception was laid bare. Ryan stood tall, not backing down, and I could see the exact moment when he decided to drop the bombshell. "You know," he said, his voice calm but loaded with truth, "Mandy's pregnant, right? But here's the thing, the timing doesn't add up. She and Dad didn't start seeing each other 3 months ago, like she's been saying. They've only been together for about 2 months. Mandy's face went white, and Greg's eyes widened. He looked at her, confused, then back at Ryan. "What do you mean?" Greg stammered. "That doesn't make sense." Ryan didn't flinch. "It means the baby you're talking about can't be his. You two met only 2 months ago, which means the baby's probably not even his." His words were like a slap in the face, and for the first time I saw panic in Greg's eyes. Mandy tried to speak, but she was losing control. "No, it's not like that," she said, her voice quivering. But the truth was out now, and there was no way to take it back. Mandy's parents, who had been standing off to the side, clearly in shock, started yelling at her. "How could you do this? How could you bring this shame to our family?" they demanded. I watched as Mandy's parents lit into her, their anger spilling over into disbelief and outrage. But Mandy didn't have any more excuses, no more stories to tell. Greg, on the other hand, was scrambling. His face was a mixture of confusion, guilt, and anger. It was like he couldn't grasp what was happening. But Ryan didn't give him the chance to hide anymore. "You thought you could leave us, take the money, and live your life with no consequences. But you can't run from the truth. Not anymore." With the police watching, Greg and Mandy were no longer in control. There was no way out for them. The officers moved in, making the arrest. And as they were taken away, I felt a strange sense of relief wash over me. The truth had come out, and finally the lies, the betrayal, the pain, it was all coming to an end. Once the chaos settled, I took a deep breath. It wasn't over yet, but it was close. We still had the matter of the $20,000, 0 cents to resolve. As promised, Greg handed it over, every penny returned. And after selling the camper van, the debt I'd been drowning in for months was cleared. The weight that had been pressing on my chest, the constant fear and anxiety, slowly began to lift. I could feel it, the shift. I was free, not just from the financial burden, but from the emotional turmoil. The past months had been a storm, and though I had been battered by the waves, I was still standing. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was healing, reclaiming what was mine. And I knew deep down that with Ryan by my side, we would be okay. As I looked at him, standing there with me, I realized that this was our new beginning. The storm had passed, and now it was time for us to rebuild. To stronger than before. In the weeks that followed, I began to feel the weight of everything slowly lifting. My health, which had been so fragile, started to improve. Each day felt like a small victory, getting out of bed with more energy, feeling the strength returning to my body, and most importantly, seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. The constant pressure that had been weighing on me, the debt, the heartbreak, the uncertainty, it was all starting to fade. And through it all, Ryan never wavered. If anything, he became even more of a rock for me. He helped around the house, taking on tasks I hadn't been able to do before. It was like he was growing up right before my eyes, showing more maturity than most adults I knew. I'd catch him doing little things like making dinner when I was too tired, or helping me organize bills. He did it all without complaint, just quietly taking charge in his own way. Watching him, I realized that no matter what had happened, he was going to be okay. He had already faced more than any child should have to, and yet he had emerged stronger, more determined. As I looked ahead, I couldn't help but feel grateful. Grateful for the strength I had found in myself, and for the way Ryan had helped me rediscover mine. It was a reminder of the resilience we both had. Life had thrown us some heavy blows, but we were still here, still moving forward. And I knew one thing for sure. Ryan's future was bright. Whatever dreams he had, whatever path he chose, he had proven that nothing could hold him back. The past would never define him, and it wouldn't define me either. Together, we were going to rebuild, stronger than before. It wasn't easy and it wasn't quick, but we were healing, and every step we took together was a step toward a better future. If this story resonated with you, please consider subscribing to stay connected. I'd love to hear how you've overcome your own challenges too. Let's keep sharing our strength and growing together.